Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alex here, and we are touching on a very, very important topic during this time of year. And as you know, in Chongqing here, we have really busted some major temperature records, recording temperatures as high as 45 last week. And we are hearing from our friends at the meteorological location here in China that this was one of the highest ratings since 1961. And I thought that it was very important that we would bring somebody onto the program today, someone who academically can answer these questions and help us, understand what's going on with this planet. So I brought Professor Feng onto the program. What a pleasure it is to see you here today. Thank you so much for taking time out. You must be a busy guy. Say hi to our audience and maybe just let them know about your academics and what you know on the subject.
Yeah, many thanks, Alex. And also
Welcome.
Thanks for iChongqing program. This is my privilege to actually join this podcast. And my name is Prof Yuming Feng. I'm working momentarily as associate professor in Ocean University, China, in Shandong Province, Qingdao City. And my academic background is climate change and climate solutions. I've been doing that since my bachelor in 2006. At 2012, I went to Germany to get my PhD doctor degree, learning climate engineering and all those assessment, analyzing climate signals, and I'll give advices and to the policymakers and the public about how we tangle the climate threats. Thereafter, I'm doing some kind of more regional work like coral reef protections against the coral bleaching. And then thereafter, in 2020, I work in industry for a little bit, doing renewable energy and a carbon footprint analysis. So I would say I have some background, most background in academia and some experience in industry. And then in 2012, I came back to China to work as a researcher on teaching tasks and also research tasks about climate-related issues. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you explaining that to the audience. In the Western countries, we'll talk about them in more detail later in the program, but there is a dispute on, is there any relevance? Does this make sense? Is it fake? Is it real? It's very divided. And I have a few questions that I think that may be able to clear up some of this, we'll call it division on such a serious topic. This year, we've had extreme hot summers here in China and Europe. My first question is, are they related? And are the droughts from both places, do they share the same cause as extreme heat waves?
Yeah, I think that's probably the answer that I would like to offer to the audience most. And yes, I think the short answer to that, those phenomena, climatic phenomena, are all caused basically by climate change. And if we think more detail about that, it is actually, when you're assuming global warming heat up the climate, heat up the Earth, and then the areas will heat it up not homogeneously. So different areas will heat it up in a different speed and a different degree at a different intensity. North Pole, for example, will be much higher increased for its temperature. And then because of this unevenly distributed heat and moisture, it further causes some climatic patterns changed. For example, we have, if we consider the cause of exactly the Europe and the United States, it was caused some jet stream migration, we call it. And then this is caused by climate change from the North Pole, basically. And then if you talk about China, then there is several climatic phenomena caused it combined together, like early withdrawal of a La Nina event, and then Indian Ocean dipole anomaly, that's another cause. And then also there's accelerated snow melting from the Tibetan areas. And then this all combined to contribute to the increased intensity and drought in those areas. But more specifically, those phenomena interact with each other and then cause the further anomaly in the atmospheric circulation, which later generates something we call it a heat dome. Those heat domes are very dry and hot. It's dominant in the areas in China, in North Hemisphere, large areas, United States as well, in Europe. because they're super dry and hot, it caused unprecedented heating events in history, and then that's what we experience. Yes, I would conclude it is climate change caused the increased intensity and the frequency of extreme hot events in the summer.
To expand on that, I mean, this year's climate, I mean, what's the look for the rest of the world? I mean, you mentioned climate change. What about the ice? Everyone talks about the sea ice, the glaciers, and their impacts if the Earth continues to get heated or heat up, or whatever terminology we want to use. I mean, what's in it for the rest of the world right now?
We look at the map of the meteorological data nowadays. It's actually there's a global impact. It's generally all heated up everywhere, and some areas are more sensitive, like North Hemisphere, Antarctica, those areas. And furthermore, we consider that if we don't do anything about cutting the emission or something, then we gradually will likely get a 6-degree warming by the end of the century, compared to, more than 6 degrees, compared to pre-industrial level. But now we have a Paris Agreement. There, we already outlined what the government should do to cut emissions and do some actions on it. And the safe line that scientists gave is 2 degrees. So compared to the pre-industrial, but what we have already committed in this Paris Agreement is very likely to lead us to a more or less a 3-degree warming. So it's not a very optimistic development. We will probably will have to coexist with a warming future. And as you mentioned, sea ice and glaciers, they are some of the manifestations of global impacts. Of course, if you warm up, as I said, the Arctic Ocean are likely to be warmed up in the most fastest way. And then you will experience more likely less diversity from Arctic Ocean, Arctic ice, and also increase the sea level. With, I think, the number we have approximately 3 millimeters per year, and for the increase of it. And by the end of this year, we'll probably have a 0.5 meter global sea level increase. That's what the climate model projected. And of course, there are also some other manifestations of climate impact, like global deoxygenation. The oxygen within the water will be less if the climate continues, and also
like
acidification. So those are associated.
I mean, to understand this, and someone that hasn't really studied much of it, I mean, in one sense, we're worried about the level of seas rising, but then we're seeing natural water, rivers dry up. And in some sense, it's somewhat confusing. And I'm trying to really grasp for the viewers here, because once again, this is an extremely controversial, which it shouldn't be, but it's a very controversial topic with countries. One country saying, well, that country needs to do a better job. But then, for example, United States gets most of its manufacturing in China, and they're saying, well, China should really put more time and energy into it. But yet again, those goods are being shipped back to America. So should we start from maybe even the consumer saying to the consumer, wait a moment, maybe you need to understand how the supply chain works? And is there any, and I know we haven't really discussed this before, but is there one country that maybe has so much pressure that they might not be able to follow these guidelines in the Paris Agreement? I mean, some of them are very strict.
I think the question for that is, academically, on academic field, we still have a dispute that how to account the carbon emissions in the most scientific and reasonable way. I think a lot of scientists have proposed that the importation and exportation related carbon should be accounted to the consumer side. But that's not what the old RPCC report usually is like. There are also some kind of emission data, for example, like shipping and airline. Those are also have controversy how to really make a country responsible to that. And I think to in a perspective of climate fairness, which means the fairness means that who really caused it, then take the responsibility. In that regard, developed countries like United States certainly would take more responsibilities, because both from the scientific aspect that climate change is linearly related with accumulative carbon emission, which lead by historically by Europe and the United States. And then, but if you're accounting China, China is a growing emitter. It's definitely a growing emitter. In the next 10 or 20 years, China's emission per capita would be equivalent to what the United States have. So I would not try to stay in a very nationalistic approach to say that China was completely, I blame everything to Europe, and because that's actually not helpful for climate condolences and climate solidarity. But I think that from this moment on, we should develop a more fair scheme and put away those blaming games, but really take actions. For example, I would be not very happy that if Trump administration, for example, or another climate denial political fraction take back the administration again in the United States in particular. But unfortunately, we see Europe and the rest of the Western world literally didn't do anything. They didn't provide or introduce any mechanism that could really mitigate and offset this harmful impact. But instead, they use this, I think it's very largely propaganda from the West, actually targeting on China on supply chain issue or anything. But I think it's really shoot on the wrong target to some extent. That's what I think.
And as we continue to work through this pandemic, we did notice, though, at least some changes, of course, in air travel from the past few years. Now, I know that maybe the outlook is long-term for scientists, but did we see anything, any healing of the Earth in the last couple of years when it was almost, we could say, in a standstill? Did we see any signs that, no one was traveling at one point, or I shouldn't say no one, but there was much less traveling, much less movement, much less tourism's going to these sites that they would go to? Did we see this Earth heal within that 2 or 3 years at all?
Well, to be honest, I was not really looking into that data, but I think there should have some patterns, unlikely a decline. But I'm not really giving credits of my speaking now because I need to look at the data. That's not what I have prepared. And I would presume that the travel cause emission would have a decline without a doubt, since we have so much less travel at the moment. But actually, the recession of economy is overwhelming everywhere. I think productivity is declining in many places, and our consumption is actually reduced in the whole pandemic area. So what is exactly the cause? Is it really pandemic directly caused this emission reduction, or it's a secondary impact because of the industry and the planning and the continuing measures, especially imposed by China, that actually prevented the travel? I think it needs to have some more serious investigations. But the productivity, the supply chain, I think from China's side and also from the Western world are trying to maintain it. This is not what the government would like to see, a decline in consumption. That's not good for the GDP.
I get that. Yeah, I know. It's, carrying on with some of these questions here, and some of them are posed from some viewers of our programs. Some people say that the high temperatures in southern China is caused by, and there's this fascination, Professor, there's this fascination with the Three Gorge Dam. One year it's either going to, they're saying it's going to collapse. Now it's, I've heard a term of reverse flooding. So let me try to ask this question the best that I can. So some people say that these high temperatures in southwest China here is caused by the Three Gorge Dam. Is there any scientific basis for them to come up with that? And can human activities other than emitting CO2s affect the climate?
I would not take that as a scientific conclusion, because from my science rationale, I don't feel it's so. And I think, as I already discussed, I think there's a consensus among scientists already that these heat domes are the cause of the heat and the drought, and they are much, much larger than a Three Gorge Dam. It covers the whole China, half of China, half of India, covers many, many areas of the whole North Hemisphere, and is so overwhelmingly dominate the climate. And then a regional impact like Three Gorge Dam would not make a significant input to such disruption. And I don't think it was a major. I mean, I think Three Gorge Dam will have some climate impact, but that will be very, very local. For example, it will cause some differences of the hydrological cycle. I mean, you got different water vapors and local precipitation, those things. That's likely possible, but for such large area, I mean, they have so many places being, affected. And I unless I was given very strong evidence and argument with scientific data, and I will not really take this seriously.
So I think maybe a lot of people that are basing that on just the visual element. When people see something visually, they assume that they're trying to connect it. Like, for example, here and around the world, in Spain, we've seen it. In the United Kingdom, we saw it. India's got some problems. I'm seeing lakes in Canada that are dry. And when people see that, I think there's two ways of looking at that. One is they're trying to figure out how that happened. And number two, it's so visually stunning to them that this could be maybe some of the indicators that maybe Mother Nature or this Earth is giving us some signals that, something needs to change here. This will bring me on to the next question I have, and I appreciate you answering these questions for the audience. And thanks everyone for joining in and watching this program. Will this become the normal after this hot summer, or will it be a cold winter? Are we going to see some extremes?
I would very much willing that I can offer the answer, and also my colleagues and all our scientists can give you a definite answer. But I think, let's take an example. A very few, almost none, if there is any, I don't know, have already precisely predicted the occurrence of these heat events this year. So we already have a lot of observations. I mean, we already have a lot of premature signals to indicate there will be a little bit warmer summer this year, but almost nobody have anticipated the scale and intensity would be like this. And likewise, we have already data here, and we are also not confident to say what the winter would look like, because it is not because our science is wrong or something. This is exactly what science works, that there are a degree of uncertainty, and we don't have enough capacity to really perfectly predict what would develop in future. And also this kind of very short-term prediction, I wish I could give more answer, but it's very specific and a highly professional area. And I'm unfortunately not really well equipped to answer it in a more confident way. So I would take a cautious position, saying that we will keep tracing and tracing and tracking it firmly. I think this is our job to do this. But I think it's safe to say that there will be likely more uncertain climate extreme events, and the intensity and the scale will likely increase. This is a consensus that we can give in a high certainty with high confidence. But as exactly to what extent that would be, I think it's very difficult to conclude.
Well, there is some positive to seeing these extremes. And one of the positive I've noticed is yesterday, our team visited some meteorologists here, and we wanted to get their take. Of course, they have a much shorter, time span on looking and predicting the weather, but it was very interesting to hear that some of the tools even meteorologists have can actually help. This is what they're telling me, that can actually help assist in, these climate changes. And they give me some examples about using satellite systems here in China. There's 4 satellite systems. I can't remember the name offhand, but it will come back to me. But they were saying that they can pinpoint hotspots and fires and stuff like that, which can prevent entire forests to be wiped out completely, which would be, to my understanding, catastrophic for this Earth. But even just focusing on meteorology, or understanding the weather patterns, even if it's kind of, we'll call it in a more easy way, like some people are watching the news at night, they are getting some forecasting, and then understanding that all these tools, at least from the basic tools, satellite imagery, finding out hot spots in forest, forecasting in a couple weeks of rain, to me, I really now see a connection on scientific, graphical information, technology information. I mean, the power of human beings seems very small in some aspect, but, is there anything else that, can be acted upon that we can do? I mean, I've given an example of us just kind of chatting with some meteorologists, and I was quite surprised because some people were saying to me, well, these guys, they're predicting weather, and I kind of agreed with them on that. But then when I went there and I saw that there is a deep compassion from even a news team that are saying, like, look, this is extreme, it was 45 here, and they gave me some other examples around the world where they were saying that the meteorology team is sharing information in a database around the world. So is there anything, I'll give you the question very clear. The power of human beings seems small to me, but is there anything that can be acted upon to help out with this?
I think you have to separate the notions of the individual power or collective human power. And if we call individually, I don't think individually anybody of us will cause a huge impact to climate, because that was just a noise in a signal of climate. And if we act collectively, for example, they will definitely cause some impact. For example, the cause of a climate is human collectively burning fossil fuels. So already a proof that actually human activities can do that. When you mention about the technology development, I think there is a trend in the human world now is called a technology fix. Technical
Technology fix. Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the ethics that regarding how human and technology should interact with each other. And we have the representative figures, public figures like Elon Musk, for example. He is very much promoting technology and cutting edge technology for something, and thinking that the human world is always related with technology development. I will tell you, in climate science, it's not always working that way. And every technology will have its externalities, environmental externalities, because when we have some new technologies, when it was largely in large scale implemented in the world, its harmful side effects very often is not very fully understood. But when you really put them into place to act, and then you will see some negative effects already taken effect over there. And then you because we don't find a reversed pathway to undo the climate change. You emit carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, even if you all try to absorb them back to the earth somewhere else, and then the climate impact is already there, and climate will have a memory about this already warmed climate, and then this inertia, we call it climate inertia, will continue growing and continue cause some effect over there. So we will definitely need to develop technology and need to improve our technology, but we should not only rely on technology, because we have scenarios. It's called the social discount factor. We have two scenarios, basically. One scenario think that the technology in future will be developed much faster, and that will make the climate management much easier. So the future harm, it is better for us to tackle the climate threat in the future, because climate technology will be cheaper and easier. This is one. The other scenarios believe that the harm we are doing, if we can tackle the climate change threat now, then the harm in the future will be much content because it will growing. The harmful impact will amplify over time. It will grow and makes it now to change the climate, to handle the climate threat. It's always more economic than to do it in future. So it results into two completely different mindset for decision makers. Should we act now or act in future? I think the academics and more tend to believe that we should act now because their projection for future technology in regard of climate is not that promising. We have a lot of obstacles and there are limitations. And if you really rely on those uncertain future development of technology, we may miss very important opportunities now. So I would take, like many of my colleagues, actually, I was somewhat more cautious about some negative impact of technology. Personally,
I mean that's an interesting point. There's some things that from my country of Canada, we have some climate change issues there. We do, because we're such a vast country, big in size. I think second geographically compared to Russia.
Yes.
We have some areas in our country though where we have some fires that are going that we can't even get to because there's no roads. And as it's getting hotter or more extreme weather in certain areas, forests are under threat. I guess animals are under threat because they have to migrate to either cooler places. Now, I have a little bit more of a personal question. I mean, and once again, controversial. No matter where you are in the world, we've had some young figures around the world try to tell us, try to say, "Hey, wake up, guys." Do you think that that's the right approach? I mean, some people are not going to agree with this. Some people are going to say, no, we have no possibility. We can't change a thing. It doesn't matter what we do. In maybe 30 years, the Earth could get cooler. So there's a little bit of, I would say, well, a large part of the population, A, might not believe the science. B, they might think it's just propaganda coming from Western countries or even Europe to try to drum up more money for this type of thing. I mean, how do you think the preparedness of countries and citizens that want to, fight this climate change? That's one question. The other one is, the country I'm in now, are the Chinese ready to face this challenge? Because this is a massive challenge, right?
Yes, I think you hit a lot of very good points in this question, and let's go from the question you asked first. The public figures, young public.
Okay.
You refer to climate activism from the
Yes.
Europe, because in China we actually most of the climate agenda was developed in a top-down approach, which was the citizen is more.
Interesting point. Very interesting point, Professor. Very interesting.
It's actually quite unique. I mean, you see contrast examples. And from the West, it is important for people to regard, is this opinion of those activities that you oppose or agree on, or it is this particular public figure that you don't like.
Right.
That's very important, because sometimes people just don't like this particular public figure, and then they are actually growing a kind of a contempt attitude towards this whole fraction. And if we carefully look at those public figures with their approaches, some of them are reasonable. Some of them actually are having an element of being we will not say propaganda, but gaining attention. There are personal interest into it. Then that makes us have to be very careful to pick up the thing that we agree with and reject the things that we don't like. But it is important that we have to respect the science in the first place, and the climate change is I think it's real. I mean, if you look at the sea ice, for example, every year we have satellite images, and then it's visible there. The sea ice melting, and then you have a less and less ice cover over there. Coral reef bleaching, one of my research, it is there, and we see every year coral reef die. And those things are not irrelevant to what public figure you can also advocate it. Anyone can advocate it. So if you don't like, I mean, Mr. A, you hate a lot. Mr. B, you like it. both of them promote this same messages. You will grow in different attitude to the messages because it's the conveyor are different. You're growing your own personal interests and preference to the person. So I would not pay attention too much for what people do it. I will care. I'm a consequentialist. I would care this kind of message they deliver, well, it contribute to our joint effort, or it's actually undermining our effort. So that's more important. And going to the next part of it, you mentioned about, I think.
Well, I had a question about, are the Chinese ready to face, this challenge? That was one of them.
I think there are one positive thing in China is that since it is most climate agenda is top-down designed. Let's take example of carbon market, which was very interesting example. In Europe, and not in Europe, but in the United States is more representative, and Canada as well. The carbon market is something very neoliberalism. It's a bottom-up approach that corporations and individuals that they want to trade carbon. Therefore, they sit together, go to the stock market, and say, then let's do a trade. I sell you carbon negative credits, and you buy it so that you can reach a better offset. And then government didn't do something to really force you to do this and that. But in China, instead, the carbon market is mainly, we learned it from the Europe carbon market scheme, and the government assign and point out which industry have to do this cut, have to do this trade, how many years you have to, which year, which city, which industry has been clearly outlined and put. And as a result, the practitioners, they don't know the carbon trade in the first place at all. They're gonna have to learn it, and they learn from the documentary stuff from the government, from Chinese central government decrees, and then they attend the lectures given by the experts, and then they started, so this is something like this, and then we grow, blah 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 blah. So the Chinese on the public level is not very much well informed actually about the climate, blah blah blah. But it's the government actually was guiding this whole campaign fighting climate, and I think the people slowly follow up, and over here slowly follow up. But a very concerning development, I would say, now is that the West is more likely to weaponize climate agenda. It's a very bad development because the West, a lot of Western populist government, and also they have a misinterpretation of China's development. They have a misunderstanding of China's intention, and then they try their best in this climate cooperation to find some negative effect to contain China. And then that's actually the kind of counterproductive effect to the Chinese public, because they more and more getting suspecting the Western's intention of these climate actions. I mean, this is basically the thing. Yeah, this is basically the thing that we should work together on it. But now the Chinese more and more think it's a conspiracy from the West. And then some of them are becoming more refusal to really follow the climate neutrality goals that the Chinese government already planned. So I think it's very bad.
And this is someone that, academically doesn't have much knowledge in this area. That I'm talking about myself here. And when we look at this discussion and we see these figureheads, as we were talking about, this activism, the way it's promoted, is it promoted from NGO organizations? Is it promoted from a private company that maybe wants to go public, selling its speakers, even for one example? What happens there is, we have media in, we'll call it the collective West, which could literally divide the audience. They could say, this figure from Sweden is speaking again, and she's saying that we're doing terrible. Well, that might turn someone off from completely getting on board and trying to even educate themselves about this global issue. And that division continues to divide people. It continues to push people away into the fact where they say, I don't believe it. I don't believe what she's saying, or what they're saying, or what he's saying, or what she's saying. Even if you give me all the data, I don't believe it. And that's the problem here. I think that this was, initially brought in by, I'm going to say the one of the first documentaries I watched on, we'll call it climate change, was from Al Gore. Okay. Now, if you're an American, you know that Al Gore was Democrat. So right there, having a political figure trying to tell a country that's already divided almost down the middle politically, you've lost half your audience, because they are not going to believe that figure. And that's where, when you made a very, very interesting point here, is that this is done from the top down here in China.
Yes.
And what a remarkable difference that can make. Let's move on to another question. You know, with the geopolitical conflicts and the confrontations hinder and undermine the global efforts of fighting the climate threat. It's almost what the subject that we're talking about now.
Yes.
With the geopolitical conflicts, we've got some issues in Ukraine and Russia. Those are going on. We can have continued wars going on in the Middle East. We have confrontations with countries that are just, hey, the world is having a real hard time, not just with climate, but with pandemics. There's blame games going on. Will this, and then I'll let you answer this question in more detail, because academically you know a lot more than I do than this.
But
is
first,
there,
Alex,
oh yes, tell me.
Could you allow me to do some additional comments for the last question you mentioned?
Please do. Yeah, I'm getting ahead. I'm just excited about this conversation. So yeah, please do. Go ahead.
You mentioned about this. I think it's a very, very bad development for liberal democratic system, that you the free thoughts and the free choice of a political fraction becomes something like a identity politics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some political beliefs become a faith. You're like really defending a faith. I mean, you call each other heretics. This is really what I see. It's like it's communication become very, very difficult. I had a conversation just 1 week ago with American scientist, and he keeps telling me that those conservatives Americans from the middle America are just stupid. I mean, mentally ill. And it's used a lot of contempting word. And I think it's very hard for me to really think why this is such a strong negative voices to call your own countrymen. But he told me that this is a social norm here. I mean, this is they're just stupid. And then I see why it's unable to communicate. It's just they won't listen. I mean, how it becomes like that? I mean, this is worth. I mean, European citizens, American citizens should really think carefully. I mean, if you really make the society like identity politics and polarization like in this way, I mean, you first started to have a different version of facts, and based on, if you have a different memories, different version of facts, and then in the end, you can only resolve it in conflicts. I mean, China was always been blamed for being authoritarian, blah, blah, blah. But even in democratic society, liberal democratic, Western democratic societies, you need to have authority, some authority that both of you agree on and respect. I mean, science can be authority as well. Human consciousness and some very, very fundamental basic values can be authority on. And based on it, you try to find some point that you can work on together. Otherwise, this will be going very, very bad for the rest of the world, because you will try to find a way to resolve your conflicts in an external way. For example, try to scapegoating others, try to blame others for your own, incompetence to solve the problems. And then, if you look at the United States for the past few decades, we also addressed something about the global war. I tell my friends who is not a politician or political scientist, say that you look at Americans who keep having the same pattern again and again since the Vietnam War and now. Every time you say this is a mistake, blah, blah, and then you keep repeating this again. Like climate change, we saw the similar pattern. You always say that, okay, you are a Democrat, and then climate change is important, and we need to do something. And then, but in the end, after 4 years, another new administration comes, and the same pattern repeats again. We are not able to change you. But you guys need to find more solutions on it, and otherwise we take all the negative impacts because of your incompetence. It was
Isn't that the truth, huh?
He was completely speechless, and he was saying that. This is really. When China trying to. This was a little bit too far away from the topic, but let me finish it. China was actually trying its best to produce the most cost-benefit and cost-effective materials and the supply chain for renewable energy stuff. And then you plan to decouple from it. And then which makes
Crazy.
actually, makes actually the cost for really, decarbonize the society, decarbonize your industry, getting more expensive. And of course, then there are strategies that how to incorporate with China, and then maybe there are some bad development in some areas, but maybe just sit down and then think about a plan that everybody are happy with, but not in this way. This way don't bring anything good. In the future, both sides will see it's a bad development, and this is zero-sum game. So it's really zero-sum game. Your rationality will tell you that this is not the right way, but
well,
it's
it's interesting because that's what I was trying to explain to you from just people that aren't of your academic skills and knowledge of this topic. As I was trying to say to you, there's division, and it's interesting that even within peers, within scholars and professors, that there is also somewhat of a division. Minor example here, but that's extraordinary to hear that story.
This is very true. The climate scientist is more or less more benign, I would call, but international politics. United States. I also have talked with them for some climate management topics. We have forums just 1 week ago. Their view of the world is from a pure liberal democratic way, that they are not approaching the world looking at it in a more realistic way. They don't analyze the cause of the war, cause of conflicts, interest conflict, but they have some presumptions, hypotheses they think was already proven true, like that when China was doing more marketing economy, doing more economy, they will grow like United States. This is one of their biggest conclusion many decades ago, because they think economy and market thing, business thing, trading thing, it's something that against the nation border. It's something that the countries and the notion of the countries, of the states, will getting less and less important. And then China will be more like the United States after growing its economy for a few years. But in the end, when the fact turns against them, it's not like that. Chinese people growing more national identity and more care about, take a pride of their national and ethnicity identity. Those scholars in the West, the majority of them, they are super frustrated, and they don't understand why. So they attribute it to the reason that public leaders, political leaders, morality, and or culture incompatibility, even civilization incompatibility, which is highly ideological and subjective, not objective. And then this is mindset that actually pretty much dominating the acting from United States, scholar field. And they really cannot. They are able to see it in a realistic way. Neither defensive or aggressive realism doctrine, you name it. And this makes even me to talk with them actually difficult.
Well, it's to add to that. If America really sometimes wants to get everyone on board, they make a great movie because they're great at promotion. And that's just how some things work in that country. If they need to recruit soldiers, they just put a nice Top Gun with support of the Pentagon behind it, and use that movie as a great promoter to get people to sign up to the Navy or the Air Force. It's like that. There's division, which is unfortunate. But then there's fear mongering that goes on, not just from a geopolitical level, like we're about to be at war, but that falls also onto this climate issue. And here's where I want to, as we were talking about the geological conflicts, are those hurting the efforts from fighting this climate change? But something else I want to add to that comment. Maybe you can answer this in the same, because I'm going to add it to this question. So we talked about geopolitical issues. We understand there's lots going on in the world right now. My concern is that going to derail or, even divide people more from fighting this climate change? And to top that, is China doing its part right now?
Okay, I think this is I had a forum last week with some scientists and the scholars and also politicians from Germany mostly, and also experts from the United States. We have a very clear discussion about it, and I found opinion is highly divided. So there are different people have different perspectives in this regard. But I take my personal. I think the global coordination, if the geopolitics conflicts intensify, I think the global coordination and the cooperation will be not that good as before. This is only regard of global coordination. For example, let's do something together. Let's make some system together. Let's make some multilateral framework that we can work together. I'm talking about this thing. But this thing is getting bad naturally because we don't have really some good atmosphere and chemistry to really work on it. And the people started to doubt each other and don't trust each other. Of course, this is a natural development. But it's important to note that I think domestically, the countries like China or like Europe will still stick to their own plan for decarbonize their society. And because I think there is already a consensus in both places that climate change is a threat and decarbonization with some cost is worth for the future. And then especially I think the Chinese government, as I could receive the signal and messages from from our superiors and from both political circles and from academic circles, the determination is strong and undoubtable, unquestionable. So I would be more confident to continue my research of doing something in this field. And I think, as I said, domestically, I think China and Europe are still having a strong willingness to do this thing. Even if now we saw the situation like in Taiwan, that China and that is seized the conversation on the climate cooperation. So that's just, I think that's just a signal for diplomacy. It's not really means that China and the United States will stop really decarbonizing. This is a diplomatic gesture. I think that's
the other thing is that we spoke about activists earlier on in this program. I mean, some people just don't want to listen to these activists, either because maybe they're too extreme. But then again, those activists seem to be the ones that are getting all the headlines and all the attention. I mean, let's say we just block out for a moment here the activism that's going on. What is it going to take? Let's say a guy like me, my friends. What can we do, first of all, and what can governments do? Is it more of a financial thing? Governments need to maybe spend a little bit less money on militaries and maybe put some more funding into this. I mean, what can the common person do to help this? Because all we're being told by the activists are, don't go on vacations, don't have fun, don't get on an airplane, don't drive a car, don't go to the gas station, don't consume, sit at home. And people are saying, well, we did do that for the last 2 years. So
that's a very nice question, Alex. I think it's a lot of the social activists, actually, their work is completely counterproductive, I have to admit, because they advocate some kind of a strategy that actually not scientifically sustainable. And in the worst case, it goes to another extreme that causes people rebound with some counteract opinions. So for those public activists, you need to understand in Europe, in United States, especially I see it to Chinese citizens mostly, that those societies, they have their own social norms. If we take a history of how human rights activities in United States for black human being, for the black people, and from the gender equalities, they need some kind of voices like in that way. And I talk it in the Chinese perspectives, and I tell it to the Chinese citizens that, so this is their way of work. And then if we consider that the world is diverse, and then we respect how they solve this problem in this way, and then this is whether it is extreme or not, is left to the European and American citizens to test. And we take our positions because we have a different culture and we have a different way of thinking. That's a completely normal. As a cosmopolitan, I would not think that we give too much contempt attitude towards those activities. More or less, it is important that they are urging their government mostly to fulfill the commitment. It's not that they are trying to try all their efforts to defame China and harm China's interest in the first place. And then their target is mostly want their government to be more responsible, which in my perspective, in my personal humble perspective, the Western government, in particular US administration, are not responsible in many, many ways. And then we need those kind of people,
Yes,
maybe even culturally not adaptive to our way, that we need those people as our comrades to work on the same agenda. And I mean, culturally, we may say that this is not something we really like, but I think you're fighting on something good cause. But
yeah.
as I said, some extreme proposals, we have the right to refuse. As I say, this is something the scientists even conclude that at the basic level, individual level, those active, I mean, how you change your life partner actually have a little bit impact. Very, very little impact to really the climate. This is the IPCC report. Last time the panel board actually concluded collectively that your individual human actions actually will not cause a huge shift. Some activists promote that as long as we do this together, then what's cause something. But there are a lot of side effects of doing that. I mean, basically, reduced consumption is a bad thing for most countries.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, this is something they don't learn economics, so they don't really understand comprehensively.
So, to make it simple, what if we have a small impact, then what is going to be a greater impact to help solve this problem, or can it be solved, or what can be done? What can be done? Like, I know people want a technological solution to it, and we said earlier on in this program that we may get yes.
So we have three options. First, we go climate mitigation, which we reduce the carbon, but it's more policy oriented. So this is actually really policy from the top. Even if it's a bottom-up society, a liberal democratic society, you need a policy, but this is government obligations. We force the government. Second, we can do more climate adaptation, which means that we coexist with warmer climate, and then which means that we need to build our community in a more resilient way. So try to understand that what future harm may impose us, and then try to this is on the city level. That in China we have a sponge city to prevent the extreme precipitation or something. And for the individual level, there is also some options like geoengineering, but I would not touch it because it's a highly risky stuff. It's an idea that we are creating a cooling effect globally to neutralize the warming effect caused by climate change. But now it's highly controversial, and that's one of my research as well. I would not advocate that. And for the public level, I think it's most important that we stick to science. We stick to science, and then we learn science, and then we improve our knowledge. And then whenever, I mean, especially for young people, you still have a future, growing career. Maybe one day you will be a policymaker, will in charge of a city or a town or something. When you are equipped with real scientific knowledge, you know how to prepare it. You know how to really making the welfare of your citizens, and you also learn, and we also need more people to talk. I mean, climate scientists, climate researchers to really talk with the public. But nowadays, I found it's very unfortunate we don't have incubated such culture and environment to let public conversation to learn a lot of things from the scientists. I see a lot of my colleagues and our friends are actually making a lot of efforts, but I think it's not enough. And for the individual, I think climate science, climate research is something. It's not that easy. Like you go on the street and make a slogan, and it's really serious science. You need some years of training in mathematics, computer. I learned marine biology, chemistry, marine physical, oceanography, blah blah. It takes really years to build a career in it.
That's what I was going to ask you, Professor Feng. You know, how long have you studied climate? What are your academics, and do you recommend someone wanting to be a professional like you? Because I mean, you're a smart guy. You're very
thanks for the compliment. I would take
no
a
problem.
more humble position. I think any science and any research, if you want to build a career of research, you really have to think that you like it. I mean, your days and nights reading research articles, gaining sensitivities about the development of other scientists' teams. And if you really don't like it, you take it as a job. You take it as a payment, where the payment that the government pay you to do some kind of a job. This is not passionate. It's very likely you won't have some good delivered outcome. I would say it because we are already very competitive globally already, and we really want people that really like it, so that we can work on something. Otherwise, it's a waste of talent for you as well. If you want to do, you can be put some places. This place, you will have some social responsibilities. You work on it. You know that you're doing something for the humanity. You know something in the lower level, like that's finance for some individual profit or something. You're growing some kind of a mindset that you think it's not that important in your life, which can balance your life more in the, I think it's more or less material way to some extent.
Just one last thing, and then you can speak about your academics to us. I mean, so much focus has been put on the area I'm in right now, Southwest China here in Chongqing. So much focus has been put on these images you're seeing all over. I mean, hardly anyone knew about this mega city about 2 months ago, okay? And now when they see the river levels, the water levels, the drought levels, the extreme temperatures, the blame game starts on China. And especially, it's focused on this region. Is this happening other places around the world? Just, I mean, we have so much media here. I'm talking international media, really, really coming down on this this area of China, because of course it's an industrial area as well, but it's a lot of blame. It's a lot of misinformation and disinformation. It's a lot of fear mongering. I mean, is this an isolated Southwest China, it's our fault issue, or is this a bigger picture here?
I would be very cautious to answer this question because I personally have never been to Chongqing myself. Unfortunately, I would be more confident to conclude myself if I had experience on it. But I think in the ground picture, China as a whole has already been targeted for scapegoating. Many of the mismanagement of the West and the mismanagement of the climate from the Western leadership. And then I would not be surprised Chongqing was singled out for some of their blames. I personally don't see Chongqing as a city has unique differences compared to Shanghai here and compared to Guangzhou, because the intention of the city government was going to improve the city and then bring in a sustainable development. If there's any mistakes or something, then this can be analyzed. But at this intensity, at this scale of negative reporting, I think it's propaganda or something.
I tend to agree with you, because even before, as we were starting to see the weather escalate, I have never seen in my life a city organize itself to prepare for extreme weather conditions. I mean, this has lasted 3 or 4 weeks of in the 40s, okay? If this happened in some of the collective West countries, you would see deaths into the thousands because of, heat exhaustion. But the way that they have organized things here, it's okay. I'm not going to say that it's 100% perfect, but let me just give you some examples. Conservation of electricity. Okay. Side streets, all side streets pretty much here in the municipality. This is a big city. This is a big city, okay? Lights out. Any fancy advertisings, malls, buildings, advertisings, lights out, okay? They've even put some car factories on hold, the assembly lines, while this is going on, to conserve energy. To care for the elders, they have made sure that underground, as you know, that the infrastructure here, and this is the difference that I'm trying to explain people about the collective West countries and, China in particular, the infrastructure is now showing where its strengths, and one of them is that it has the ability to operate still a subway line. It's cool air underneath there, and the people have identified that, yes, our subways are cooled, that they are setting up places where the elderly can go, not just to do nothing, but they can sit there, they can play some games just if it's a little bit too hot in their apartment. I mean, in other countries, there's alerts that are going out saying it's hot weather, check on your neighbor to see if they're alive. I mean, yes, those are the warnings we get in the West, but here it's more like, okay, this government facility is open for you. Please forward it. I was walking on the streets here yesterday. There were shop vendors telling you to come in if you even showed the slight sweat on your skin and offering free water. I mean, it's like a community that has come together here. And when you use that example from the top down, the people don't feel like they're being targeted and blamed for doing this to the earth. When you have a government that has organized or at least has a game plan, there's some trust there. And that's where I know I'm going on and on about this point, but trust is gone when it comes to trying to be on a better path for this earth, at least from what I can say. Now, my countrymen might say, well, wait a minute. No, we don't agree with you on that, Alex. But there is division. All you have to do is go to a university or maybe even to an elementary school or even a local area where there's adults sitting there and wanting to get into a conversation. You will see and you will hear the division where people will say, oh, that crazy girl from Sweden. Well, just using that terminology, she's a crazy girl right there is a stereotype. And we've had other organizations, I think Greenpeace has made some errors over years. They've lost some trust issues. And when it gets on the screens in Hollywood, we feel like it's just Western propaganda or depending on whatever fits our narratives. Now, if our livelihood was affected by this, which it could be, if you're a farmer or someone in Canada that has a lot to do with climate, when it starts to affect your pocketbook, then people will start to pay attention. And isn't that strange how that happens? I mean, I don't know.
I think this is actually scientist consensus. I tell you only in this channel, this is first time. Actually, global scientists have a high hope and a trust to Chinese government would take a lot of work of climate works because they see Chinese government are capable. It is regardless whether ideologically they like Chinese government or not, but they see China's model is effective. This for most of climate scientists, they don't have a doubt into it. The most I discussed with, so they take a contrasting example of India. I mean, Liberal Democratic Party. See, look compared to India. I mean, India played lot of goals, and they don't think India would fulfill it at all in the first place. They think India will definitely fail on it because it's chaotic in the politics there. I mean, highly divided society as well, even has some racial and ethnicity conflicts, and it is unable. So the key is whether you are able to mobilize the society towards one goal. This is I think is more than trust issue. Of course, China's model is unique. It has historical reasons and has its particular culture. I'll take you an example, very interesting. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe in the 1970s, 1980s, the Chinese government even helped the couples to matchmaking each other. So there's if you have a factory of the male workers, a factory of female workers, they plan the factories in the same locations to try to matchmaking you. This is insane in Western values. I mean, the marriage freedom and something. This is insane to Western values, but it is here the culture is the Chinese. That generation over that time consider it's normal. The government are supposed to nurse you, to take care of you, because that's what the government is in their understanding. Nowadays, the younger generation have a higher demand for the government, and many of them have different understanding with each other. With globalization, we see how Western government organizes society, which is differently. And therefore, different ideas also come across and then think about how to improve the society. But I think this kind of culture and a kind of social norm are not able to be adopted by any other country. I think the Chinese leaders are also very clear about it. So they don't have any intention to really plan to really spread this kind of a model. So every time I see this kind of argument from European Union commissioners, and they say we have to prevent China from spreading their values. I say no. I mean, no Chinese will tell you that they're going to spread their values, because they will always tell you that we are unique, so just don't touch us. This is always the way it is. And then I found it's a very strong mismatch from the anticipation from the West to China, and China's self-identification, self-positioning. So I think there's definitely need more communications, at least from a public level, to clarify it.
Well, Professor Feng, I mean, you're an intelligent guy. Maybe you could just let our audience know one more time your academics, and if possible, I don't know if you're on the social networking platforms, maybe where some people can find you or find your work, or at least commend you for your great efforts. I'll pass it over to you, and you can tell our audience about your academics, and if possible, somewhere where they can follow what you do.
Maybe you are the one who making me to make a social media account, because I really don't. I'm not.
I think you should. Yeah, you're a bright guy, very smart guy.
Yeah, and then I'll probably think about opening one social media account, and then let people reach me if they want to have some more communication with me. And I'm always willing to help people. I mean, in a way that I see suitable. And yeah. What is the first request?
Oh yeah, and you're and I mean, people are going to be very interested in what you are studying, because you're pretty knowledgeable in this. I mean, yesterday we were really looking to find somebody in this sphere of things, and we were struggling, and then your name was mentioned, and it was highly mentioned, and I can't thank that individual Daniel enough for mentioning your name, because yes, you're exactly the person that we needed to talk to. So yes, tell us academically what you've been up to.
I was very honored to say that actually I was probably the first generation of interdisciplinary trained student from the West. I have a Chinese, more likely Chinese identity. Some of the followers actually know Navina Haydn. She's my wife, and she's already very politically active in social media. And I am more focused on my own academic aspect. But before I came to Germany, I'm hardcore physical oceanographer, to only learn about the mathematics and the climate, ocean currents, atmospheric circles, blah blah, these things. And then when it comes to Germany, I mean, I realized that interdisciplinary is so important. I learned also social economy, and I also learned social politics. I mean, either from I visited the University of Harvard, Kennedy Department of Social Management, Global Management, and also I went to Heidelberg University to learn climate economics, and also my personal experience. Also, I mean, I have some bad experience in Germany about the political problems caused my career and damaged my career because of. When I tried to learn few German lessons, some German teachers, which are super unprofessional, and raise up some questions to attack China, which I feel offended. And I feel offended because this is something that my parents have been made efforts for generations. My old parents, grandpa, grandma, they lay faith on. I think at least from respectful level that you should not judge those people's efforts for their own identity or something. I mean, we may have dissenting comments on something, but it is really bad that you put it this way. So that pushed me a little bit more into this side of learning why the West take this way. And then it's slowly making me more and more knowledgeable in this field. And then and after I meet Navina Haydn as well, and then we help each other on understanding the world together. And then slowly make me not that, I mean, it's typical and standardized as a climate scientist, because I also engaged into a lot of political discussion in international relationships. And I indeed put some efforts to learn it seriously, but I don't really generate publications yet. And I also joined forums in China for international politics, and did indeed have my position to argue something. And I was always promoting some ideas of what we call science diplomacy, science among scientists to really steer the boat into the right direction. I think that's one of the things I personally want to do a lot. And we also reached some politicians on it, but I think we definitely need more momentum to make it in this way. We can't always passively rely on from a top-down approach that gave us a mission and then we're going to come to fulfill it. We also have to really realize the public communications and connecting the world through science, through the common interests are very important. And this is not something that can be accomplished by governments, intergovernments alone. So that's my message that I actually would like to give.
You know, I have a saying that was given to me from my dear father that passed away many years ago. He said, always be proud of where you come from. That's number one. Number two is the guilty always scream the loudest. And that has resonated in my mind that, you know, people like you that are educated, bright person, the good news is that you've experienced what it's going to be like on the international stage here, where countries may have individuals that want or have desire to bring climate change. But once again, this is going to be a very, very controversial topic coming up in the next few years. And that experience that you have, it sounded that it was very, very changing in some of your mindset, that you will probably encounter that in the future, maybe not on the same topic, but having that skill and that professionalism that you have and that understanding and knowledge that you have, you're setting yourself up for a very bright future. And I commend you for that. And, at least spending some time of your day here on short notice, talking about important issues that, our audience and people of this world need to kind of tune in to watch. And I appreciate that, the way that you've delivered these answers to my questions today are genuine, okay, and heartfelt. I know you say, of course, but you can understand that for some of our audience, which is, I would say majority of it is international. The moment that you mention the word climate, the division starts. But actually sitting here for an hour with you, chatting with you, you're a person that's knowledgeable and actually really cares about what's going on here. And you doesn't seem like you have an agenda, which is refreshing. Professor, I want to thank you again for joining us today. And we will put your academics or what you send us. If some people contact us and they want to reach out to you, just let us know if that is possible. I'm sure that you will get some calls. I know some of our media friends are going to be wanting to watch this program once it's over and probably reach out to you to further this discussion in some way or fashion. But once again, thank you. And I'm going to let you get on with your day. Sounds like you have an exciting day ahead of you. So I want to thank you once again for joining the program. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you on social networks soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Yeah.
Take care.
So much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.